I remember the day Helen left as though it happened yesterday. 20 years of marriage, gone in an instant. Her suitcase was by the door, and she stood there poised like she was heading off to some grand adventure. There wasn't even a hint of remorse in her eyes. Instead, there was a spark I hadn't seen in years, the kind of spark that comes from forbidden excitement. I had asked her what this was all about, though deep down I already knew. "I need something more, Thomas," she said, her voice calm but cold. "I've met someone." The words struck me harder than any physical blow ever could. My wife, my partner of 2 decades, was leaving me for another man. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. My response was as quiet as the devastation I felt. "And you're sure this is what you want?" "Yes," she replied, with a certainty that made my stomach churn. I deserved to be happy. She deserved to be happy, as if I hadn't spent the last 20 years trying to make her just that. We had built a life together, a house that held laughter and arguments, Sunday dinners and sleepless nights. And yet, here she was, throwing it all away for someone who hadn't been there for the mundane, gritty parts of life, someone who hadn't seen her at her worst or celebrated her at her best, someone who hadn't earned the privilege of loving her. When the door closed behind her, the silence in the house was deafening. I sat on the couch for hours, staring at the walls we had painted together, the pictures of vacations we had taken, and the faint stain on the carpet from when she spilled wine during a particularly rowdy game night. Every corner of that house bore memories of us, and now those memories felt like ghosts haunting a place no longer alive. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. Friends and family once shared now seemed to divide into factions. Some expressed shock and outrage on my behalf. Others, though fewer, claimed Helen was brave for following her heart. Brave. That word made my blood boil, as if betraying someone who had stood by you for 20 years required courage. But life didn't stop. I had to keep going, even when the weight of her absence felt unbearable. I threw myself into my work, rediscovered hobbies I had let fall by the wayside, and slowly began to rebuild a sense of normalcy. There were moments when I felt like I was drowning, but I refused to let them define me. If she thought I would crumble without her, she was sorely mistaken. Then, one evening, 6 months after she left, Helen showed up at my doorstep. Her once confident posture was gone, replaced by a slumped frame and hollow eyes. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days. For a moment, I felt a pang of pity, but it was quickly drowned by the memory of her walking out on me. "Thomas," she said, her voice trembling, "can we talk?" I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. What could we possibly have to talk about? She swallowed hard, her eyes darting around as if looking for words in the air. "I made a mistake. Leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life." The audacity of it all left me momentarily speechless. I studied her face, searching for any sign of the woman I had once loved. But all I saw was someone who had traded stability for a fantasy, only to come crawling back when reality didn't meet her expectations. "So, it didn't work out with him?" I asked, my tone devoid of sympathy. She flinched at the question. "No, he wasn't who I thought he was." I let out a bitter laugh. "And now you want to come back? Just like that?" "I've realized how much I took you for granted," she said, her voice cracking. "You were always there for me, Thomas. Always. And I threw it away. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I'm begging you to give us another chance." There was a time when those words would have been all I needed to hear. A time when I would have welcomed her back with open arms, desperate to patch up the life we had built together. But that time had passed. "Helen," I said, my voice steady, "you didn't just leave me. You shattered every promise we made to each other. You walked away without a second thought, chasing something, someone you thought was better. And now that it didn't work out, you think you can just waltz back into my life as if nothing happened?" "I was wrong," she whispered. "I see that now." "Do you?" I asked, stepping closer. "Or are you just scared of being alone? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're more upset about your rebound failing than you are about what you did to me." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't waver. For once, I put myself first. I had spent too long trying to fix what she had broken, only to realize that I didn't need her to be whole. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, and I wasn't about to let her tear it apart again. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, Thomas. I love you." "No, Helen," I said, my voice firm. "You don't love me. You love the idea of me, the safety I provided, the stability. But love? Love doesn't abandon you when things get tough. Love doesn't trade you in for something shiny and new. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everything we built together." The tears were streaming down her face now, but they didn't move me. Not this time. "You made your choice," I continued, "and now I'm making mine. I deserve someone who sees my worth without having to lose me first. Someone who values the life we create together, not someone who's willing to throw it all away at the first sign of discontent." Her sobs filled the space between us, but I stood my ground. I had spent too many nights crying over her, wondering what I had done wrong, when the truth was, the fault was never mine. It was hers. "Goodbye, Helen," I said, stepping back and closing the door. For the first time in months, the silence in the house felt peaceful. It wasn't the emptiness of loss, but the calm of a new beginning. I had finally taken back control of my life, and it felt damn good. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, surrounded by the memories that had once haunted me. They no longer felt like ghosts. Instead, they were reminders of how far I had come. I had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and the gut-wrenching pain of losing someone I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. And in surviving, I had discovered something I never knew I had: strength. As I sipped my wine, I raised the glass in a silent toast to myself, to new beginnings, to self-worth, and to the unwavering belief that I deserved better. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.